In my practice, we first started off thinking about improvisation, and building the vocabulary really was brought about by lots of sketches, and those are the works on paper. The works on paper are like false takes, they're instantaneous, they're not thought through like the larger works. They are improvisational. I mean, I approach making on those terms with creating something new every time. I'm not looking at anything else when I make the works on paper. From there, there's a conscious decision to start setting up situations to where that language can be ordered in very specific ways. And I think it's important for me as an artist to have certain kind of registers or signifiers of how language operates in our own visual culture, and to have enough signification, but then there's exploration of my language coming in and how I'm trying to break outside of this like paradigm that we live in and how, you know, language operates here. I'm thinking beyond it. Like within this exhibition specifically, giving the viewers a little bit with the wall piece, with the quotation marks, those two sculptures that act like a quotation mark. And then you have this kind of space in between. If that is their entry point, then that is going to guide them into reading the other kinds of works in the space. And I think that was a significant decision to make in order to like give a little, but not give away too much, and kind of allow the work to speak on its own terms as well. Whether I'm titling the exhibition or whether I'm titling different works, there are references to how I think about language operating within film, how I think about language on the stage. And so there are those kinds of references that I think can guide, but there's nothing going to be one-to-one. I think it's much more opaque. In order for the work to really operate, I need it in a space that can, that's big enough for it to breathe in, and where I can start to set up different strategies for myself and for the work to see like what happens when sculpture that was that had a life in a different exhibition a certain way can have a new kind of iteration in the new space. So I think even having this exhibition, I think, was really particular for me, because I had to deal with certain things, like I'm looking at the poles, the pillars in the room, and learning to see those as not a hindrance or a distraction, or not see them in the negative, but see them as a potential in how I am going to configure the work or get the work to act in relationship to the present architecture in the room. The ideas I have are all kind of connected as I think about these things, and I learn a lot. I learn a lot by having an exhibition and given the opportunity to have a space and do what I want. It's really, really helpful, and I feel like I learn every time I have an exhibition. I'm learning the work more, I'm learning what it can do, what it can say, how it can potentially be read, and that for me as an artist is exciting, so that it's not the finale, having the exhibition and saying, okay, the work is done, boom, it can go out into the world. I think it's an opportunity for me to really start thinking, like once I've, kind of choreographed the space with everything in it, now I get to think about it. What does it mean to do that? Because a lot of times, if I'm doing a wall painting, I don't really know what that looks like until I get in there and do it. And so, yeah, I think it's a really, really important thing to be given the opportunity to have the exhibition as a place to figure some new things out. I'm thinking a lot about how I can get my language to behave and at times perform. And those are two different things. But the more I think about my practice and how it has unfolded over the last 10 years, when I first started off making small works on paper to kind of build this vocabulary, I didn't know the next step at that point. So I'm just making, and this is all I have to deal with, are these smaller works on paper. After that, I started kind of looking at these as a site I can go back to, pull things from, and make other works from. And in doing so, I start to see new aspects of this language kind of expanding and taking on different kinds of form. I mean, scale was a big element in the work that started to show me the possibilities of it. So, unfolding a practice over 10 years, it's something now that it wasn't when I started out. So when I say something like I'm thinking of it as a total art form or a total work of art, I'm really thinking that the strength is when all the parts are in the room, or at least many of them. I don't know if it needs to be every single thing, but when they're kind of in concert with one another, when the sculptures and the wall and the paintings and the objects can kind of like come together and create kind of a synthesizing work, I think that for me is the most exciting, and it has taught me like that is the thing now that really propels me, is like when I can get everything in the same room together. It takes about 3 coats of, I gesso both sides, you know, and there you have to finesse it and get it really nice and stretched and taut. I stretch them right on the wall. But there is a kind of labor that goes into getting them prepared before I can even move on them. Wanting them to act a certain way after I prepare them and they hang on the wall, sometimes they act like paper a little bit. A lot of times people ask me what material that is, and it is canvas, but I think I'm drawn to the fact that it kind of acts like paper a little bit. And maybe that's a lot of things. I like when they act a little bit different than what they are. And hanging them flat against the wall was, you know, that move, I think I was maybe pushing against convention a little bit, which, you know, when they're this giant, when they're this big, I can see why structure bars are very necessary, but I wanted to at least attempt, if I could, to get them to act maybe a little more elegant on the wall, or mysterious, like they're just floating. And so that's kind of why I endeavored to really work out the process so that I would make that possible. My hope is that there is some kind of register with them, that they understand what's going on in the room. I think I would potentially think it was a failed effort if people were totally baffled or confused. But a lot of times I think the feedback that I get is there seems to be a cohesiveness in the forms, whether they're on a 2D surface, whether they're on the wall or a sculpture or moving out into space being performed. I think there are enough registers in the room for people to make certain connections. So I'm hoping that there's always a connection, like formally as well as conceptually, with the work.